Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world that makes modern self-care routines look like amateur hour. Edwardian high society. That's right, this is an era where women measured their status by the size of their hats, the whiteness of their knuckles, and yes, the quality of their chloroform. Forget green smoothies or spa days. These ladies took relaxation to a whole new level, and by level, I mean flat on the fainting couch, possibly hallucinating that the wallpaper was talking back. So, before you drift off into your own chemical-free slumber, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. Bonus points if you're listening while lying perfectly still and avoiding all strenuous activity. Very on theme for tonight. Now dim those lights, turn on a fan for that perfect white noise, get comfortable, and maybe keep a bottle of smelling salts nearby just in case you feel a swoon coming on. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it was like to spend your days wearing a corset tight enough to bruise your soul? Did Edwardian women actually faint as much as the novels say, or was everyone just pretending to avoid chores? How did they get anything done while gently gliding from chaise lounge to tea table, pausing only for a quick whiff of their favourite sedative? And who decided chloroform was the answer to, why do I feel slightly uncomfortable in my extremely uncomfortable outfit? Could you survive a single afternoon of Edwardian rest, or would you be exiled from polite society for drinking tap water and sitting on the floor? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1907. You're surrounded by lace, lavender, and a suspiciously large collection of tiny vials. Welcome to the only era where passing out at parties was not just encouraged, it was practically an Olympic sport. You awaken not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to the gentle clink of silver as a maid pours tepid water into your porcelain basin. The air is thick with lavender sachets and social anxiety. Your greatest challenge before breakfast, finding the willpower to uncurl from your fainting couch without overexertion. No one expects much, just to look pale and slightly overwhelmed. This is not your average morning. There's no blaring phone, no frantic emails, not even the desperate howling of a dog that needs to be walked. Here, in the rarefied stillness of the Edwardian drawing room, tranquility is weaponized. Silence isn't peaceful, it's a performance. The house tiptoes around your rest, and you, society's fragile flower, are expected to float gently into consciousness, as if startled awake by nothing more than a passing wisp of melancholy. You attempt to rise and immediately regret it. Beneath the layers of linen and last night's anxieties, your body feels as if it's been folded into a Victorian trunk and mailed overseas. The fainting couch creaks beneath you, a subtle warning that any sudden movement might provoke a full collapse. The wallpaper is aggressively floral, the chandelier glints menacingly, daring you to squint. You do not dare. Across the room, the maid's face is an unreadable mask. Is she judging your lack of energy? Does she suspect you spent half the night wide awake, staring at the ceiling, pondering whether your potted fern is dying or just dramatically inclined? You'll never know. In Edwardian high society, suffering in silence is practically a competitive sport. You gingerly dab your face with a lace handkerchief, careful not to disturb the delicate powder that signals you're not just awake, but fashionably wan. Somewhere downstairs someone is already worrying about the reputation of the family silver. You, meanwhile, are busy wondering how long you can delay sitting up before your spine officially gives out. The house is an echo chamber of restrained activity. Maids pad silently through corridors, carrying trays with enough china to survive a minor earthquake. The air itself smells faintly of potpourri and unresolved emotional tension. A distant clock chimes 8:30, which, in Edwardian society, is the universal signal to begin feeling guilty for not being out of bed yet. You finally make a valiant effort to sit up. Every muscle protests. Your corset, which you somehow managed to sleep in again, has moulded itself into a shape best described as existential dread with boning. You consider calling for help, but etiquette dictates that one should only summon assistance in the event of imminent death, or if the tea arrives too cold. The first order of the day is to review your emotional state. This is a crucial Edwardian ritual. Are you feeling peaky, delicate, nervous, or just in need of a restorative sniff from the little brown bottle tucked discreetly beneath your pillow? Today, you settle for easily startled. It's a classic. You glance at the window, careful not to let direct sunlight touch your skin. Everyone knows a tan is social suicide. The garden is meticulously trimmed. The birds are singing, and you hate them just a little bit for their enthusiasm. Out there, people might be doing things. In here, you're doing your duty by being artfully unwell. The sound of distant conversation floats through the door. Hushed voices, the shuffle of slippers, the gentle admonishment of someone who dared to whistle. There will be visitors today, or so you're told. You steel yourself for the possibility of morning callers, each one a fresh opportunity to display your signature blend of listless grace and medical mystery. You lie back against the cushions and contemplate the sheer effort required to survive until breakfast. Your greatest asset is your ability to appear both beautifully fragile and vaguely troubled, a skill honed over years of practice, and, occasionally, small doses of something slightly numbing. In Edwardian society, that's practically a resume. Outside, the world is moving on. Inside, you're just trying not to faint before noon. Welcome to the morning. You've already achieved more than most people dare attempt. You've woken up exhausted and made it look effortless. And in this house, that's a triumph worth celebrating with another nap. The day truly begins with your lady's maid wielding what looks like a medieval torture device, a corset. She yanks the laces tighter with every gasp, determined to sculpt your waist into a size never seen in nature. Every breath is a calculated risk. Pass out now, or wait until lunch for maximum drama. There is a moment, right before the first tug, when you wonder if you should have written a will. Corsetry in the Edwardian era is not for the faint of heart. Ironically, it's also the #1 cause of fainting. You stand before the mirror, arms raised in surrender, as your maid threads the ribbons through a labyrinth of eyelets, every pull drawing you closer to the platonic ideal of fragile yet oddly menacing flower arrangement. The sound of tightening stays is the music of the upper class, one long, slow and slightly wheezy aria. With each cinch, your rib cage is less a part of your body and more a diplomatic hostage. Your organs begin jostling for space, the lungs eyeing the liver with suspicion, the stomach quietly vowing revenge. Fashion magazines call this cultivating elegance. Your spleen calls it a cry for help. You try to breathe shallowly, like you're always on the verge of sighing dramatically, a necessity, not an affectation. Inhale too deeply, and the whalebone reminds you who's in charge. Exhale too quickly, and you risk unbalancing the delicate tower of undergarments. Chemise, corset, petticoat, possible emotional baggage. The goal is an hourglass silhouette, though the effect is more like human hourglass dropped from a great height. Your maid, who has seen it all, reassures you with the same soothing lies she's used for years. Nearly done, miss. Just a few more inches. You'll look so fashionable the vicar's wife will faint on the spot. You're not sure whether this is meant as encouragement or a thinly veiled threat. Either way, you soldier on. The corset isn't just about looking fashionable. It's about survival. Social survival, anyway. To show up uncorseted is to invite scandal, whispers, and possibly exile to the invalid's chair at the next garden party. Your waist measurement is a topic of conversation, currency, and for some, a form of emotional blackmail, Lady Pettigrew's daughter cinched to 16 inches, someone will whisper, and she only passed out twice. Corset logic is full of contradictions. Supposedly, you're to look both frail and robust, ready to ride a horse side saddle or collapse at the first sign of excitement. There are etiquette books with entire chapters on proper swooning etiquette, all of which come back to one rule: always faint in the direction of something soft and socially advantageous. Ideally, a velvet settee. Second best, the lap of a minor aristocrat. As you're finally strapped in, you become acutely aware of your posture. Slouching is impossible. Your spine has been transformed into a Gothic archway. Sitting is a geometric puzzle. You hover elegantly at the edge of chairs, perched like an anxious heron, while your toes tingle with the absence of blood flow. The rest of your morning is a delicate dance. You glide through hallways, making small, dignified movements, because turning too quickly might create a wardrobe malfunction worthy of a 4-page write-up in the Tatler. Every activity becomes an Olympic sport. Dropping a glove is a crisis. Retrieving it would require an emergency team of footmen and a discreet screen. And let's not forget the psychological warfare. Your mother insists her waist was smaller at your age. Your rivals parade past stiff as soldiers, each one pretending not to notice that everyone is turning purple by the end of the hour. Your father, oblivious to the suffering, asks why you don't eat more at breakfast. You simply smile, because actual laughter might cause spontaneous combustion. Yet beneath the laces and the layers, you sense the hidden power. The corset is agony, but it's also armour. Each gasp is a defiance of logic and gravity. Every carefully managed breath is a triumph over physics and expectation. You may never move comfortably again, but for the next 12 hours, you're the very image of society's impossible ideal, restrained, refined, and one breath away from a dramatic exit. Corset on, composure steady, you're ready to face the day. Just don't sneeze. Breakfast is a delicate affair. A single slice of dry toast, maybe half a boiled egg if you're feeling rebellious. You nibble politely while gossip circulates with the tea, and the only thing richer than the food is the possibility of scandal. Nobody mentions the bottle of soothing syrup hiding in the sugar bowl. It's not the breakfast itself that draws the Edwardian woman to the table, but the intricate ballet of manners and secrets that hover just above the silverware. The table is set with ruthless precision. Plates aligned, spoons glinting in the faint morning sun. A parade of preserves arranged with more formality than a royal summons. You take your seat with a kind of trembling grace, adjusting your napkin and trying not to make eye contact with the sausage links, which are strictly off-limits except in emergencies or as conversation pieces. Every movement is choreographed. You break your toast with the delicate resignation of a surgeon separating tissue. Butter is applied with the flat side of a knife, but only if it doesn't look too enthusiastic. Anything resembling actual hunger must be suppressed, and heaven help you if your stomach growls loud enough to compete with the gentle clinking of teacups. Hunger is a private matter. Publicly, you subsist on dignity and half-hearted sips of weak Darjeeling. At the head of the table sits the family matriarch, her posture so perfect you suspect she sleeps upright in a wardrobe. She surveys the proceedings like a hawk with indigestion, quick to spot anyone attempting to sneak an extra bite of marmalade. Across from you, a cousin fans herself unnecessarily, her plate untouched but her ears keenly attuned to any hint of intrigue. Breakfast for her is an opportunity to gather ammunition for future conversations. She's not eating, she's collecting secrets. The conversation is light but fraught. Weather is safe. The threat of rain is debated with the intensity of military strategy. Someone mentions a neighbour's new carriage, and the room hums with polite scepticism. After all, who can trust a family that flaunts rubber tyres? Between these exchanges, subtle glances are cast toward the sugar bowl. where the infamous soothing syrup sits disguised in a repurposed cordial bottle. Its label promises tranquility and gentle mood adjustment, but everyone knows it's mostly chloroform laudanum or whatever else the apothecary could sell that month. You pour tea with a steady hand, careful not to spill a single drop. The ratio of milk to tea is debated like an art form, and lemon is considered avant-garde. Sugar, on the other hand, is more than a sweetener, it's a delivery system. A discreet twist of the wrist, a quick glance to ensure the matriarch is distracted, and a few drops of syrup transform your cup from beverage to blissful haze. It's the secret handshake of the breakfast table, a tradition passed from mother to daughter, each pretending the bottle is only for really bad days. Scandal, meanwhile, is always on the menu. News arrives wrapped in whispers, a distant cousin seen at the opera without gloves, a neighbour's daughter caught reading a French novel, the vicar's suspicious interest in Mrs. Peabody's rhododendrons. The art of gossip is to say nothing directly, but to leave enough crumbs for others to follow. The best breakfast stories come with plausible deniability and a hint of cinnamon. There's always an undercurrent of competition. Who can eat the least? Who can drop the sharpest line about Lady Fitzhugh's questionable hat? You master the art of smiling just enough, nodding with sympathy at every petty grievance, and refusing all offers of extra toast. Your place at the table depends not on what you eat, but on how artfully you pretend not to care about food at all. As the meal draws to a close, the plates are whisked away by silent staff. You rise, not quite satisfied, but reassured that the real sustenance of Edwardian breakfast isn't nutrition, it's reputation management. By the time you leave the table, you've consumed 2 bites, 3 rumours, and the lingering sweetness of collective denial. The day can now truly begin. Applying makeup is a full contact sport. Rice powder for paleness, rouge for that hint of almost living, and a touch of belladonna to dilate the eyes. You stare into the mirror, wondering if you're glowing or just slightly poisoned. Spoiler, it's probably both. This is not the swift, slapdash routine of a modern Tuesday morning. No, this is ritual. An ordeal that begins before you're truly awake and ends only when you've achieved the look of a faintly haunted Greek statue. The light in your boudoir is soft, flattering, and utterly insufficient for detecting the subtle difference between ethereal and tubercular. You settle at your dressing table, a battlefield of tiny jars, silver brushes, and implements designed by someone with a personal grudge against eyebrows. First, the powder, always rice, never anything so vulgar as talc. The goal is a complexion that suggests you've never met the sun, physical exertion, or any strong emotion. You dab, pat and dust, carefully working the pale, chalky cloud into every visible crevice. The maid circles with a damp cloth, prepared to catch any stray powder before it escapes and stains the upholstery. By the end, your face could double as a warning against open flames. Next, the rouge, because looking entirely undead is a little too on the nose, even for Edwardian society. Rouge comes in cunningly disguised pots that look like they should contain poison, and sometimes do. You tap just enough onto your cheeks to simulate the blush of youth, or, depending on the occasion, a mild case of embarrassment over your own existence. It's a balancing act. Too much, and you look like you've run up the stairs, scandalous. Too little, and someone might recommend more bed rest. Then there's the belladonna. The very word means beautiful woman, which is both a compliment and a threat. You drop a single bead into each eye, bracing for the sting. The pupils widen, the whites gleam, and suddenly you appear as though you've been up all night reading tragic poetry by candlelight, a valuable asset in any competitive drawing room. There are side effects, of course. Blurred vision, occasional hallucinations, the risk of accidentally declaring your love to a coat rack. All part of the beauty gamble. You consider the eyebrows. In this era, a good brow is thin, arched, and so subtle it might as well be an urban legend. You pluck, tweeze and draw, sometimes with a charcoal pencil, sometimes with a trembling hand. The result is a look that communicates I'm approachable, but only for about 3 minutes at a time. Lip colour, if applied at all, is more suggestion than statement. A hint of rose wax, a dab of carmine, just enough to look alive, but not so much that anyone suspects you're enjoying yourself. Joy, after all, is best expressed in neutral tones. The restlessness creeps in about halfway through the ordeal. You've spent nearly an hour performing delicate, repetitive tasks, all so you can emerge looking exactly as you did yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. You glance out the window, where gardeners and footmen hustle with purpose, unencumbered by layers of expectation or arsenic-based foundation. For a moment you envy their freedom, their sunburns, even their blisters. But you stay seated, trapped in the stifling embrace of beauty and boredom. The ritual continues, perfume dabbed behind each ear, rosewater for innocence, lavender for piety, musk for when you want to start a scandal. Hair arranged in waves so soft and elaborate they could destabilise the monarchy, and a final inspection under the critical eye of your lady's maid. Every detail is scrutinised. Any flaw is corrected, any imperfection concealed, as if you might at any moment be called to stand as living proof that beauty, boredom, and gentle madness go hand in hand. You finally rise, unsure whether you look rested or just thoroughly sanitized. Either way, the day can now begin. You're flawless, you're restless, and, if the belladonna kicks in, you might even be seeing double. That's Edwardian glamour for you. Hidden beneath your pile of lace handkerchiefs is a tiny mysterious vial. One sniff, and suddenly the stresses of polite society melt away, along with a few brain cells. Chloroform isn't just for surgeons and criminals. Here, it's considered an accessory. It's the most talked about secret in every Edwardian boudoir, though nobody ever mentions it directly. The little brown bottle sits quietly at the back of your drawer, nestled among sachets of lavender and old love letters, humming with dangerous possibility. Chloroform, the scent of upper-class serenity, the perfume of avoidance, the household's worst-kept secret. Its mere presence speaks volumes about the world you live in, a world where taking a moment can mean anything from a quick sniff to a full afternoon nap, courtesy of chemical intervention. You don't remember exactly when it became fashionable. Perhaps it was after that disastrous luncheon when Lady Forsyth fainted face first into the blancmange and arose, half an hour later, declaring herself spiritually rejuvenated. Or maybe it was the trend started by Countess Whitehaven, who claimed her robust constitution was due entirely to the restorative properties of modern science. Either way, the brown bottle spread faster than gossip at a country wedding. Now every woman of means is expected to own one, display one discreetly, and know just how to use it. The rules are unwritten but fiercely enforced. Chloroform must be administered with subtlety and grace. You can't just flop backward on the chaise and shout, "I need my medicine." That's for Americans. No, you must delicately withdraw the bottle from beneath your lace and dab a drop onto a handkerchief, preferably monogrammed. Then, with a gentle, practiced movement, you lift the linen to your nose, inhale, and drift. The whole process takes less than 10 seconds, but its effects linger, softening the edges of reality like a watercolour painting left out in the rain. There's a spectrum of users, and you quickly learn where you fall. The beginners, the social novices, dab cautiously, eyes darting to see if anyone notices. The veterans, usually dowagers and aunts, take deeper pulls, faces glazed with the serenity that comes only from years of not listening to one's husband. And then there are the thrill-seekers, who claim that a sniff before breakfast sharpens the mind for conversation, or at least dulls it enough to survive another round of complaints about the butler's new sideburns. Society's relationship with chloroform is complicated. Officially, it's for nerves, for feminine vapours, for hysteria brought on by an excess of embroidery. Unofficially, it's the glue holding every luncheon, garden party and committee meeting together. Even the doctors, those cheerfully useless Edwardian men with thick moustaches and thinner diplomas, prescribe it for nearly every ailment. You seem anxious, Mrs. Wadsworth. Have you considered a little sniff? Never mind that, Mrs. Wadsworth hasn't felt a single emotion since the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. It becomes part of the day's rhythm. After breakfast, a restorative. Before callers, a preparatory waft. During an especially dull anecdote, a surreptitious inhale. The scent mingles with rose water and powder, blanketing drawing rooms in a gentle cloud of not quite consciousness. Sometimes, entire gatherings move through their social rituals in a happy haze, conversation looping pleasantly, arguments dissolving before they begin. At these moments, you understand why history will remember the era as tranquil. But there are hazards too. Overindulgence is a risk. Sometimes you wake up on the floor with vague memories of having tried to order lunch in French, or of having explained the plot of Ivanhoe to a potted plant. There's always that one friend, usually named Millicent, who goes a little too far, her laughter echoing through the house long after everyone else has moved on. But such minor casualties are brushed aside with the same discretion used for every family scandal. Most importantly, chloroform is a ticket out. When the expectations, corsets and conversations close in, you have an escape hatch. One breath, one swoon, and you're suddenly somewhere softer, where your worries dissolve into pleasant fog. In a world where every move is watched and every word weighed, the allure of the little brown bottle is obvious. Some accessories are for show. This one is for survival. And so, you tuck it back into your drawer, safe for the next crisis. A tiny, potent promise that no matter how ridiculous things get, you always have an exit strategy. As the clock chimes 10, visitors arrive. Conversation topics include embroidery, the weather, and fainting etiquette. If you swoon gracefully while someone recounts their garden's blight, you're the talk of the season. If you stay conscious for the entire visit, people worry about your constitution. The Edwardian morning visit is an art form, a ritualized sport played with teacups and trembling nerves. It's a test of social stamina wrapped in silk gloves and veiled in the scent of violets. You take your place in the drawing room, spine ramrod straight. Thank you, corset. Hands delicately folded in your lap, as the door opens to admit the first of many feathered hats and tightly wound smiles. Callers never come alone. They arrive in flocks, trailed by daughters, aunts, and, on unfortunate occasions, small dogs wearing ribbons. There's always a moment of mutual assessment as they sweep into the room, whose hair is most elaborate, whose dress is latest, whose aura of suppressed panic is strongest. The stakes are high. One wrong comment and you're relegated to the social hinterlands until next Michaelmas. Conversation begins as it always does, with polite admiration for the furniture and nervous glances at the tea tray. Embroidery is a safe topic, preferably described in loving detail for those who have never actually held a needle. You nod solemnly as Lady Whitmore relates the harrowing tale of a dropped stitch. There are gasps, exclamations, and, if you time it just right, a delicate swoon at the phrase unravelling hem. This, you've learned, is how reputations are made. Weather, too, is dissected with the seriousness of a government inquiry. Was the frost last night hard enough to threaten the dahlias? Is the sun's angle this morning auspicious or foreboding? Opinions diverge, alliances form, and, if things get truly contentious, someone will invoke the Farmer's Almanac, producing it from a handbag like a weaponized prophecy. But the true Olympic event of these gatherings is the faint. Fainting is never just a symptom, it's a performance. a subtle signal to the room that you're in touch with the finer sensitivities of existence. You practice daily. Knees soften, eyelids flutter, and you drift sideways onto the nearest velvet cushion. Success is measured not in recovery time, but in the gasps you elicit, and the promptness with which a maid produces the smelling salts. "So delicate," the guests whisper, eyes wide with admiration and perhaps a touch of envy. "So sensitive to the suffering of tulip bulbs." Of course, remaining upright for the duration of the visit is considered suspect. If you exhibit too much robust health, someone will inevitably lean in with concern. "My dear, you haven't swooned once. Is something wrong? Should I fetch your bottle?" In this world, stamina is cause for alarm, and a faint is proof you're still fully human. Tea arrives, weak, lukewarm, served with cake so dry it could absorb a minor flood. You smile, sip, and keep one eye on the conversation, the other on your emergency handkerchief. As the topics shift, often to matters of etiquette, who fainted where, and was it done tastefully, you realise that even the act of reviving someone is a delicate social dance. Shoulders are patted, wrists are waved, and words like restorative and composure float through the air like perfumed mist. All the while the little brown bottle hovers in the background, just out of sight. Everyone knows it's there, nestled in reticules or tucked into the folds of a sleeve, ready for its dramatic cameo. Sometimes a guest will excuse herself with a telltale overcome by emotion routine, only to return moments later with a suspiciously glassy smile. As the last visitor departs, bouquets of congratulations and concern left in her wake. You let your posture sag in sweet relief. The ordeal is over. You have survived another morning social gauntlet, your constitution questioned, your delicacy celebrated, your reputation as gently unstable perfectly maintained, and you did it all while barely finishing your tea. Now, with guests gone and cushions slightly compressed from all the fainting, you are free to collapse in earnest. In Edwardian society, there's no greater victory than enduring the morning callers, whether you remember the conversation or not. Your doctor, who is definitely not a real doctor, prescribes rest, calm, and frequent use of soothing vapours for your vague complaints. Everything from ennui to existential dread is cured with a whiff of chloroform. It's not medicine, it's an identity. In Edwardian society, wellness isn't about health, it's about performance. You play the role of fragile but fascinating with the dedication of an award-winning actress. Symptoms are optional, but a diagnosis is compulsory. Today, you awake with a case of the nerves, or perhaps it's melancholia, or malaise, the mysterious condition that afflicts all women who own more than one lace collar. There is no shortage of possibilities, and no real expectation that anyone, including you, could tell them apart. When you summon your physician, it's less for treatment and more for pageantry. He arrives resplendent in a top hat, brandishing a stethoscope he definitely bought second-hand. You wonder if he's heard of germs. You hope not. The last thing you need is an experimental hand-washing regimen. He takes your pulse, delicately, peers into your eyes, briefly, and inquires after your digestion with the solemnity of a priest. "How are your feelings?" he asks. "Not your lungs, your feelings. This is medicine for the soul, or at least for the soul that can afford an account at the chemist." You describe your complaints with the appropriate level of vague detail. Fatigue, fluttering heart, inexplicable boredom, sudden sadness at the sight of decorative porcelain. The doctor listens, nodding wisely, scribbles something on a pad, and assures you that it's nothing serious, provided you avoid excitement, sunlight, and any news more recent than last Thursday. The prescription is always the same: rest, calm, and the soothing vapours. He hands you a small bottle, possibly chloroform, possibly gin. He instructs you to use it as needed, which is code for whenever you think about how long the afternoon is going to be. The only side effect: you may find yourself less troubled by embroidery, family politics, or the state of your soul. Other treatments are suggested, but none involve actual medicine. Perhaps a brisk walk, if by brisk you mean a gentle stroll, accompanied by a maid under a sunshade, with at least 3 scheduled rests for weakness of the knees. Or maybe a period of enforced bed rest, preferably in a room decorated in the restful tones of perpetual sadness blue. Sometimes he recommends light reading. You select a book so devoid of plot you forget what it's about while holding it. You're not alone in your suffering. Every woman you know has been diagnosed at some point with too many feelings. Lady Chudley's daughter caught a case of longing for the seaside and had to be carried to Bath. Miss Fairchild developed an acute aversion to Mondays. Even your maid, who is suspiciously robust, sometimes claims a twinge of dullness of the spirit to avoid rearranging the china cabinet. In this world, hysteria is less an illness and more a ticket to membership in the grand club of the languid. It's not the malady that matters, but the style with which you endure it. You sigh, you recline, you cultivate an air of distant suffering that is both alluring and completely untreatable. Guests inquire after your health with barely concealed envy. You're still a little pale? How divine! Someone remarks that you look particularly wan. You preen. At the heart of all this is the identity you wear as comfortably as your favourite tea gown. The patient. You're not expected to heal, merely to endure beautifully. Every prescription is a performance. Every bottle of soothing syrup is a prop. The goal is not to get better, but to remain interestingly unwell. To do otherwise would be, well, unladylike. And so you accept your diagnosis with the quiet pride of someone who knows that, in Edwardian society, being delicately afflicted is far more desirable than being well. After all, what would you do with perfect health? You'd have to get up, go outside, and join the rest of the world, a truly terrifying prospect. Far better to lie back, breathe deeply of your medicine, and bask in the gentle applause of your own ennui. You perfect the dramatic feint. Knees buckle, eyes flutter, land softly on an overstuffed chaise. Bonus points for clutching a lace handkerchief. Chloroform is optional, but highly recommended for authenticity, and to avoid having to listen to Uncle Reginald's opinions on suffrage. In Edwardian society, fainting isn't just a spontaneous reaction. It's a carefully cultivated social manoeuvre, a dramatic punctuation mark to the endless run-on sentence of upper-class life. Some might call it melodrama. Here, it's considered a necessary skill, like small talk or avoiding carbohydrates. Each home has at least 3 fainting couches, lovingly placed at strategic intervals for maximum convenience. If you're truly talented, you can hit one from anywhere in the room. The first rule: never faint by accident. Sudden collapses are for the uninitiated, or worse, for servants. No, the artful feint requires rehearsal. A proper swoon starts with a deep, thoughtful sigh, a trembling hand raised to your forehead, and just the right amount of theatrical wobble. If the conversation turns to taxes, politics, or, heaven forbid, science, you signal your retreat by gazing at the ceiling, as if inspiration or divine intervention might descend from above. Then comes the flutter. Eyelids flicker, lips part, and, with a carefully measured gasp, you crumple like a letter from a long-lost lover. Timing is everything. Too soon, and your audience isn't warmed up. Too late, and you risk actually hearing Uncle Reginald compare women's suffrage to letting sheep into Parliament. Aim for the precise moment when attention peaks, just as Lady Agatha is about to reveal the scandalous fate of the vicar's niece. You're not escaping the conversation, you're upstaging it. Choreography matters. The fall should be slow, graceful, and impeccably directed toward the softest piece of furniture available. You want to land on an overstuffed chaise, preferably in a pool of afternoon light, so that your pallor can be admired by everyone present. If you must, a pile of decorative pillows will do. Landing on the floor is unforgivable, unless you're aiming for the kind of notoriety that gets you written up in the Tatler. Accessories enhance the spectacle. The lace handkerchief is essential, a fluttering white flag of surrender to the trials of modern existence. A well-timed clutch of pearls or a tiny bottle of smelling salts can add drama and a subtle whiff of authenticity. If you're really dedicated, a feint accompanied by a gentle, accidental spillage of tea is regarded as a masterstroke, so long as you don't actually stain the rug. Chloroform, discreetly applied, can take your feint from passable to award-winning. A dab on the wrist, a whisper into a handkerchief, and you're floating, untethered, safely insulated from the ongoing saga of how many turnips the estate yielded this year. It's the Edwardian equivalent of putting your phone on Do Not Disturb. The aftermath of the feint is just as important as the feint itself. You must be revived gently, surrounded by anxious whispers and fluttering fans. A skilled lady's maid hovers, poised with a glass of water and a line about the nerves. The company gathers, expressing awe at your delicate constitution and subtle envy at your dramatic timing. So sensitive, they murmur, so fragile yet so courageous. Of course there's a social calculus involved. Feint too often, and you're dismissed as attention-seeking. Feint too rarely, and you're thought alarmingly robust, perhaps even unfeeling. The sweet spot is to feint just enough to keep everyone guessing. Is it the heat, the stress, or just an expertly wielded little brown bottle? Later, as you recover with a cup of weak tea and a cushion to the lower back, you reflect on the unspoken truth. In Edwardian society, power isn't always in what you say, but in how elegantly you collapse when you have nothing left to say. The world spins on, and you, artful, poised, and gloriously horizontal, float above it all, secure in your reputation as both participant and living, fainting masterpiece. Sometimes the combination of corsetry and chemicals is too much. You go down like a sack of lavender-scented potatoes, and household staff rush to revive you with smelling salts, cold compresses, and, ironically, more chloroform. Corset catastrophes are the slapstick backbone of Edwardian high society, the inevitable price of fashion's strangest arms race. Every morning you submit to the laces, drawn ever tighter, as if your waist alone holds back the tide of social collapse. The corset is a marvel of engineering and a menace to internal organs, an object of both worship and dread. There are moments you suspect its true inventor was less a tailor and more an escaped villain from a Gothic novel. It starts innocently enough. You're standing by the window admiring a wisteria bloom when a sudden wave of dizziness sweeps over you. Perhaps the maid got ambitious with the laces. Perhaps you got ambitious with the chloroform. Either way, you begin to list to starboard, eyes fluttering, knees trembling, hands reaching for a conveniently placed overstuffed chair. There's a brief pause, the kind that only comes right before disaster, and then you drop, elegant in theory, unceremonious in practice. Your descent is never dignified. The sound is unmistakable, a muffled thud cushioned by crinoline and family pride. A passing housemaid trained in emergency protocol immediately produces smelling salts with the precision of a military surgeon. She waves the bottle under your nose strong enough to shock a racehorse back to consciousness, and you jolt upright, blinking, suddenly aware that your hat has landed somewhere south of dignity. The household rallies. Someone fetches a cold compress, straight from the icebox, which is also storing tomorrow's aspic. Someone else cracks open a window, letting in a gust of air and a flock of unsolicited opinions. The butler stands by, uncertain if he should intervene or simply update the family crest to feature a fainting sofa. Irony reigns supreme. The first order of business, after regaining semi-consciousness, is usually more chloroform. "Just a drop, dear," the housekeeper murmurs, as if the solution to fainting is to risk another round. This is society's answer to every ailment. When in doubt, double down. There's a whole taxonomy of corset disasters, recounted in whispers at afternoon teas. There's the swan dive, where you collapse with such grace that everyone applauds before they realise it wasn't a party trick. There's the crinoline corkscrew, in which you faint but your skirts catch on a passing dog, spinning you into a curtain. Most infamous of all is the double feature, a swoon at luncheon followed by a surprise encore at supper, typically blamed on the vapours rather than a second helping of gooseberry tart. These mishaps are never simply ignored. In Edwardian society, a good collapse is social currency. Guests swap tales of their own near misses, each story outdoing the last. Lady Havisham once fainted so hard her tiara left a dent in the floorboards. Miss Blythe spent an entire dinner asleep under the table, with only her slippers peeking out, and was congratulated for her charmingly unobtrusive constitution. Recovery is a carefully choreographed affair. You're bundled up, propped on a chaise, and fussed over until your colour returns, usually somewhere between eggshell and a crew. A restorative cup of weak tea is administered. The matron assures everyone that you've always been delicate. Someone writes a note in the family diary. Tuesday, fainted, revived, blamed pollen. Meanwhile, your corset is quietly loosened. Just a notch or two, never enough for actual comfort. Comfort is for the lower classes, or the dead. As you sip your tea, you realise that in this house, survival isn't about outlasting your peers. It's about learning how to faint with style, recover with poise, and never ever let anyone catch you breathing freely. The day resumes. The drama is over. Your pulse settles. Tomorrow the cycle repeats. Laces, chloroform, gravity, applause. In Edwardian society, being fashionably horizontal is both a risk and an art. Afternoon tea is where secrets are exchanged, alliances are formed, and everyone pretends the clotted cream is the most dangerous thing on the table. Between sips, you sneak a discreet inhalation from your vial, blaming your sudden giggles on the cucumber sandwiches. The table is laid out like a battlefield disguised as a picnic. Fine china gleams, teaspoons are aligned with unsettling precision, and every pastry sits untouched, daring someone to show actual enthusiasm. You lower yourself into your chair carefully, because sitting too quickly can cause dizziness, scandal, or worse, enthusiasm. The room hums with restrained anticipation. Tea, after all, is not about the tea, it's about information. The ladies arrive in waves, each one trailing perfume, opinions, and just a hint of competitive exhaustion. Hats are removed, gloves are adjusted. Everyone compliments everyone else in that very specific way that sounds kind but feels like a legal threat. You pour tea slowly, as if sudden movement might upset the social balance or cause the biscuits to unionize. Conversation begins harmlessly enough. Someone mentions the weather. Someone else agrees too strongly. This is how it starts. Within minutes, you're knee-deep in rumours disguised as concern. Did you hear about Mrs. Calder's nerves? Tragic. Apparently she's taken to lying down after luncheon. Bold. And her husband? Practically absent. Curious. You nod thoughtfully, filing the information away like a librarian of chaos. There's gin in the teacups. Not openly, of course. That would be uncouth. But it's there. Mingling politely with the bergamot, taking the edge off conversations that have been circling the same three topics since 1897. You sip carefully, aware that the line between pleasantly buzzed and lying on the floor explaining yourself to the fern is thinner than your patience. Someone leans in. This is important. Voices drop. Fans flutter. You smell perfume, powder, and the faint chemical tang of someone else's coping mechanism. A marriage is failing. A daughter is reading too much. A neighbour's maid was seen smiling at a footman. This is dangerous territory. You gasp softly, not because you're shocked, but because it's expected. Shock is the currency here. You take another sip. You take a breath through your handkerchief. Just a small one. Enough to blur the edges. Enough to make the room feel a little softer. The voices a little farther away. Your shoulders drop. Your smile loosens. If anyone notices, they attribute it to the excellent spread. No one ever suspects the vile. That would imply intention. Cucumber sandwiches circulate, their true purpose unclear. You take one politely, remove the crust with surgical precision, and forget to eat the rest. Eating too much during tea suggests hunger, and hunger suggests desire, and desire is simply not done before dusk. Instead, you listen. You laugh at the right moments. You tilt your head sympathetically when someone describes their terrible week, which mostly involved a poorly arranged centerpiece. The unspoken competition intensifies. Who knows the most? Who looks the calmest while knowing it? Who has the best fainting couch placement for a strategic exit? Someone giggles unexpectedly. Someone else grows suddenly very serious. Alliances shift. Seating arrangements are mentally revised. You feel a warm haze settle in, like a blanket woven from denial and gin. At some point, the conversation turns slightly political. This is dangerous. You deploy the emergency maneuver, a soft sigh, a distant look, a comment about feeling a bit overcome. Immediately, concern replaces debate. Tea is refilled. A cushion appears behind your back. Crisis averted. This is not your first tea, and it won't be your last. As the afternoon winds down, guests rise slowly, collecting hats, secrets, and each other's words. The room looks exactly the same as when they arrived, but you know better. Something has shifted. Someone has been elevated. Someone has been marked. You remain seated a moment longer, breathing shallowly, letting the gentle anesthesia of the afternoon carry you through. Tea is over, the gossip will ripple outward, and you, slightly sedated, socially victorious and completely exhausted, have survived another round. You hear rumours of women demanding the vote. Scandalous! The only revolution you're leading is in the art of fainting at just the right moment during a heated debate. For some, chloroform is a way to cope with change. For others, it's a way to avoid it entirely. There is a tremor running through the drawing rooms of Edwardian England, a tremor dressed in sturdy boots and sashes that read "Votes for Women." Outside, the streets fill with shouts and banners, but inside, the parlours echo with anxious whispers and the steady clink of teacups. You adjust your shawl and look meaningfully at the fireplace, as if hoping it will swallow up any trace of conversation about politics. It begins innocently, as all threats do. A cousin returns from the city, eyes alight with forbidden ideas, pamphlet peeking from her reticule. "They're marching in Trafalgar Square," she says. "Women marching." The words are enough to send Mrs. Pennington into a gentle fit of coughing, and you, perhaps, into a minor crisis of etiquette. Marching is for soldiers, not for ladies with embroidered handkerchiefs and scheduled hair appointments. The other ladies look horrified, but also slightly curious, the way one might stare at a caged tiger in a too small zoo. "But what do they want?" asks Aunt Edith, voice trembling as she ladles extra cream into her tea. "The vote, Edith," someone murmurs, as if the very phrase might cause the roof to cave in or the jam to curdle. The word suffragette ripples through the room, and suddenly every woman is considering the structural integrity of her corset. You are naturally expected to have an opinion, or at the very least a well-timed distraction. Your training comes to the rescue. You sigh, flutter your eyelids, and gently recline against a cushion, clutching your pearls with enough conviction to derail the conversation for a full minute. This is the safe, time-honoured response to radical change. Play the part of the overwhelmed bystander. If pressed, you can always deploy your ace. I simply can't discuss politics before luncheon. For the bolder souls in your circle, the suffrage debate is a test of nerves. They join book clubs that double as secret societies, whisper code words, votes, society, Woolwich Arsenal, over the rim of their teacups, and send anonymous letters to the Times. They return from town meetings flushed and energised, full of ideas that threaten to upend everything, including the flower arrangements. Their courage is both impressive and exhausting, requiring more stamina than you can muster on a weekday. For the rest of you, chloroform is an easier answer. Change, after all, is best met with a gentle anaesthetic. When someone mentions Mrs. Pankhurst or worse force-feeding, the room grows heavy with sighs and the faint but unmistakable scent of soothing vapours. A discreet whiff from the little brown bottle, and the political storm blurs into something pleasantly distant, like a thunderstorm in another county. It's not that you're opposed to progress, in theory. It's just that every generation needs its distractions, and yours specialises in fainting at the first sign of actual work. Let someone else shout in the streets. You'll hold the line in the drawing room, defending the right to nap through social upheaval, and only wake for scones and safe topics. As the debate fades and tea cools, the conversation pivots to safer subjects: hats, houseplants, and the enduring mystery of Lord Basil's missing monocle. The suffragette marches continue somewhere far away, but in your world, the status quo is guarded by cushions, etiquette, and a generation's worth of delicately feigned exhaustion. And should anyone ask for your stance, you have a ready answer, just as soon as you recover from your perfectly timed swoon. Venturing outside means braving crowds, carriages, and the terror of fresh air. Your reticule contains not just coins and calling cards, but an emergency dose of chloroform, just in case the millinery department is out of ostrich feathers again. Shopping in Edwardian London isn't just a matter of running errands. It's a test of endurance that would leave lesser mortals gasping for breath and questioning their life choices. First comes the ceremonial preparation. Your maid brings you gloves, pearl buttons never mismatched, a hat so large it requires its own postcode, and a veil fine enough to suggest mystery, but not so thick that you miss the latest scandal whispered on the street. A whiff of lavender water, a dab of rose on the wrists, and you're ready, at least on the outside. The journey begins with the perilous business of navigating the front steps. Edwardian footwear is many things: stylish, impractical, occasionally weaponized but never grippy. One wrong move, and you're flat on your bustle before you've even hailed a cab. You glance up and down the avenue, as if expecting to see roving bands of suffragettes, or, worse, street urchins armed with unsolicited opinions. Instead, the greatest danger is the never-ending parade of carriages and the threat of being splashed by a passing omnibus. Arriving at Harrods is both a relief and a fresh ordeal. The doorman greets you with a bow, his face carved from marble, his eyes hollow with the knowledge that no one is ever happy to see him. Inside, the air is thick with perfume, possibility, and the faint terror of losing your hat in a revolving door. The crowds surge, all with the same intent: to spend, to see, to judge, to survive. You cling to your reticule, a fortress in miniature. Inside, every necessity is packed with military precision: coins for bribing the haberdasher, calling cards for accidental run-ins with minor royalty, a handkerchief, monogrammed obviously, and the ever-reliable brown bottle. Chloroform, after all, is the only defence against the existential horror of a glove sale in full swing, or a ribbon counter devoid of mauve. The hat department is ground zero for social warfare. Here, the rules of engagement are clear. Feign interest in straw while surreptitiously elbowing rivals away from the best velvet. The shop girl, who knows exactly how much power she wields, offers you a feather that can only be described as aspirational. You nod, hoping the price will scare off the competition. It does not. There is a tense moment when Lady Fernham's daughter eyes the same plume, and you both reach for it. You grip your reticule tighter, feeling for the reassuring bulk of your chemical courage. A subtle inhale, and suddenly you are the embodiment of serenity, even as your heart pounds like a derby winner. In other departments, the dangers are subtler. The fragrance counter, where one misstep means smelling like a heady blend of lilies, regret, and last week's scones. The glove counter, a frenzied landscape of women pretending not to notice each other's cuticles. At every turn you must remain polite, even when you're outnumbered, outbid, and possibly outdressed. Harrods is also a social theatre. You exchange greetings, compliments, and coded warnings. The tea towels are very reasonable today, if you know what I mean. Every meeting is an opportunity for espionage. A whispered tip about the state of Lady Agatha's finances. A glimpse of Lord Wellesley in the undergarments aisle. Don't ask, don't tell. At last, your shopping is done, your reticule lighter, your spirit intact, mostly, and your sense of superiority freshly buffed. You step back out into the street, triumphant, victorious over crowds, commerce, and the occasional shortage of ostrich feathers. You survived Harrods. You have the hat to prove it. You may have fainted briefly in the perfume section, but in Edwardian society that's just considered good taste. As the carriage takes you home, you settle in for a much-needed nap, grateful for modern conveniences and for the tiny secret bottle that makes it all possible. Lunch is less about food and more about surviving passive-aggressive remarks from your mother-in-law. When the conversation turns to your childless marriage, you clutch your bottle under the table and count down the minutes until you can make a hasty, if wobbly, exit. The Edwardian luncheon is a masterclass in emotional endurance disguised as a meal. You arrive not with an appetite, but with armour. A corset cinched a bit tighter for courage, your most diplomatic smile, and a reticule fully stocked with chloroform and plausible deniability. The table is laid with an elaborate arrangement of silverware and suspicion. Every fork gleams, every napkin is starched into submission. The floral centerpiece is both decorative and a tactical barrier for moments when eye contact must be avoided. Your mother-in-law, seated at the head of the table, surveys her dominion with the frosty assurance of a minor monarch. She inquires after your health, her tone making it clear that robust well-being would be frankly disappointing. She prefers her daughters-in-law delicate, grateful, and just a touch on the edge of collapse. You oblige with a genteel cough and a careful arrangement of your hands in your lap. Lunch begins with soup, always tepid, always an awkward shade of green. The conversation drifts from the weather, never quite agreeable, to the neighbours, never quite respectable. You master the art of nodding at intervals while making no actual commitments. The goal, emerge from the meal with reputation, marriage, an appetite for life still faintly intact. Your father-in-law is present, but largely ornamental, peering over the top of his newspaper like a slightly confused tortoise. He occasionally grunts in agreement with whatever is being said, having perfected the art of selective deafness after decades of family luncheons. Your spouse, meanwhile, looks on with the haunted gaze of a man remembering he once had hobbies. The main course arrives, a tragic slab of overcooked meat nestled among boiled vegetables. You nibble politely, praying your efforts at chewing will not be mistaken for enthusiasm. Conversation intensifies. Your mother-in-law, never one to miss a social opening, lobs her first remark over the asparagus. You know, in my day, women your age already had children and excellent posture. A lesser woman might bristle, but you simply take a discreet sip of water and squeeze your vial beneath the table, reassured by its cool presence. The questions arrive next, disguised as concern. Are you feeling well, dear? Sometimes poor health is a sign the body wants to create new life. You offer your most practiced wan smile and murmur something about nerves. If all else fails, there's always the option of a sudden, well-timed faint, an exit strategy as old as the silverware. Dessert arrives. something wobbly and gelatinous that mirrors your resolve. Your mother-in-law eyes you as one might a finicky soufflé looking for cracks. Perhaps a change of scenery would do you good, she suggests sweetly. They say the seaside air is excellent for the constitution and fertility. You nearly drop your spoon, saved only by the familiar tingle of chemical courage. Throughout, you keep the conversation afloat with gentle questions about gardening, the latest vicar, and the enduring mystery of where the best marmalade is sourced. The trick is to say nothing of substance while emitting the faint impression of agreement. This is a luncheon, after all, not a negotiation. Finally, as coffee is served and the clock ticks past endurance, you make your move. A quiet sigh, a delicate hand to your forehead, and a murmured apology. I do believe I need to lie down. There is a general chorus of understanding, after all. Delicate nerves are always more acceptable than strong opinions. You retreat to your room, victorious by the narrowest margin. You survived luncheon with your in-laws. No one stormed out. No one confessed to a crime. You even managed a second helping of pudding. In Edwardian society, that's as close as anyone gets to a genuine family triumph. An Edwardian garden is a thing of beauty, unless you have allergies, a tight corset, or a tendency to swoon near rose bushes. You join the family stroll, take a suspiciously long sniff from your handkerchief, and wake up an hour later beneath a rhododendron. The garden walk is considered essential for your health, which is ironic, because it's one of the most dangerous activities in your daily schedule. Doctors recommend fresh air, relatives insist on a little colour, and society agrees that being seen outdoors proves you're not actively dying. None of these people are wearing your corset. None of them have hay fever. None of them are being asked to walk slowly, gracefully and upright, while their internal organs negotiate a temporary ceasefire. You step outside armed with the usual equipment: gloves, parasol, hat large enough to block signals from passing aircraft, and your trusty handkerchief. Officially, the handkerchief is for dabbing perspiration or pollen-induced tears. Unofficially, it is a mobile exit strategy. The garden stretches out before you in manicured perfection, gravel paths raked into submission, hedges trimmed with military discipline, flowers blooming aggressively as if personally offended by your presence. The stroll begins at a polite pace. You glide along the path, careful not to crunch the gravel too loudly. Loud crunching suggests vigour. Vigour suggests opinions. Opinions lead to conversations you do not have the strength for. You smile at the roses, which smell wonderful and are almost certainly trying to kill you. Bees hover ominously. Somewhere nearby, a lawn chair creaks in judgment. Family members chatter around you, pointing out blossoms and commenting on how reviving the air is today. Someone remarks that walking is good for the circulation. You nod weakly, circulation already a distant memory thanks to your corset. Each step is a calculation. Too fast and you risk dizziness. Too slow and someone suggests another lap. The garden is full of hazards. Uneven stones wait patiently for you to twist an ankle. Sunlight threatens freckles. A sudden breeze lifts your skirt in a way that invites commentary. You clutch your parasol like a weapon, using it for balance, defense, and emotional support. The scent of flowers grows stronger, mixing with cut grass and earth, and something vaguely medicinal from your own person. About 10 minutes in, the symptoms begin. A light pressure behind the eyes, a flutter in the chest, the unmistakable feeling that the day has gone on long enough. You fall slightly behind the group, pretending to admire a particularly dramatic hydrangea. This is your moment. You raise the handkerchief, inhale deeply, and allow the world to soften around the edges. The next thing you know, you're horizontal. You come to beneath a rhododendron, the leaves forming a sort of judgmental canopy above you. Sunlight flickers through the branches. Birds chirp. You feel oddly refreshed if a little damp. A concerned relative kneels nearby, fanning you with a hat and murmuring about the heat and delicate nerves. Someone has fetched a glass of water. Someone else is blaming the roses. This, you realize, is the ideal way to experience nature. You've technically gone on a walk. You were seen outdoors. You breathed the air. And yet you missed the exhausting part where you were expected to remain upright and conversational. It's the best of both worlds. The gardeners will later whisper about another one by the shrubs, but that's just proof you're participating in society. When you're helped to your feet, or more accurately carried back toward the house, you feel triumphant. You took the prescribed exercise and survived. You can now truthfully say you enjoy garden walks, especially the lying down portion. As you're guided indoors, the scent of flowers fading behind you, you make a mental note to choose the rhododendron again tomorrow. It's shady, it's quiet, and most importantly, it understands you. By 3 p.m., it's time for your scheduled rest. Translation: 2 hours of gently losing consciousness while the housemaid dusts around you. The true challenge is waking up in time for evening visitors without drooling on your lace pillowcase. Resting is not just encouraged in Edwardian society, it's practically a patriotic duty. The afternoon lie-down is a hallowed institution, protected with more vigilance than the family silver. You retire to your bedroom, the air thick with lavender water and the lingering scent of strong tea. The curtains are drawn just enough to bathe the room in gentle twilight, blurring the line between napping and simply ceasing to exist for a while. You arrange yourself on the chaise lounge, the angle scientifically chosen to optimize both spinal alignment and dramatic effect should anyone wander in. A faint breeze stirs the lace at your windows. You clutch your handkerchief like a lifeline, prepared for emergencies ranging from unexpected visitors to a sudden philosophical crisis about the meaning of decorative embroidery. The housemaid, gliding silently from corner to corner, is part of the ritual. She dusts, fluffs, and occasionally pauses to check that you are, in fact, still breathing. The unspoken rule: one must always look beautifully asleep, never inconveniently comatose. Drooling is discouraged. Snoring is unforgivable. Waking up with pillow creases is a private tragedy. But you take your chances. This is your moment of rebellion, your break from the endless carousel of conversation and corsetry. At first, your mind resists. It insists on replaying the day's slights. Your mother-in-law's comments about your posture, your own regrettable choice of hat ribbon, the relentless advance of a rival's roses in the south garden. The brain, like a fussy child, must be coaxed into stillness. You focus on your breathing, each shallow inhale drawing in the scent of sachets tucked beneath the mattress. If that fails, there's always the discreet bottle in your bedside drawer, a few whiffs, and even the memory of the family fortune's uncertain status floats gently away. As you drift, time takes on a peculiar quality. Minutes stretch and contract. The world grows quiet, punctuated only by the soft swish of a duster or the distant echo of carriage wheels in the street below. In this half-awake state, your anxieties lose their sharpness. The endless obligations, the delicate social manoeuvres, the gnawing fear of a surprise poetry recital, all fade into a pleasant woolly fog. There are risks, of course. Lie down too long, and you risk waking just as guests arrive, hair pressed into wild topography by your pillow. Wake too soon, and you may find yourself conscripted into some household crisis, a missing doily, a debate over which jam to serve at tea. The trick is perfect timing, a skill passed down from mother to daughter, honed over countless afternoons of practice. You may dream, but the dreams are gentle and undemanding. A never-ending garden party, a table set with perfect scones, a room full of admirers who never ask difficult questions or notice when you nod off mid-sentence. If you're especially lucky, you'll wake to find the maid has placed a small cup of restorative tea at your side and open the window just wide enough to let in a hint of reality. Eventually the hour arrives. You rouse yourself, smoothing hair and dignity, and prepare to face the world again. The afternoon lie-down is over. You're refreshed, or at least convincingly so. You survived another day's greatest trial, doing nothing and doing it beautifully. Evening beckons with its promise of new challenges and fresh excuses to recline, and as you rise, pillow-creased but undefeated, you know you've honoured the most sacred of Edwardian traditions, the nap as national pastime. Nannies do most of the work, but you make an appearance for the daily parade of small, suspiciously quiet children. You offer hugs, vague encouragement, and a quick inhale of your favourite anaesthetic before retreating back to your safe zone. The Edwardian Children's Hour is less about parenting and more about pageantry, a time when you, as lady of the house, descend gracefully upon the nursery like a benevolent spirit summoned by the ticking of the clock. The children, freshly scrubbed and presented in their least-stained pinafores, are arranged with military precision by their ever-vigilant nannies, each child brushed, straightened, and lightly threatened into compliance. You pause outside the door, fortifying yourself with a discreet sniff from your handkerchief. One mustn't appear too alert or, worse, enthusiastic. The goal is to project warmth with a faint, dreamy distance, as though you are both deeply loving and also lightly anaesthetised. The children have come to expect this. Their mother is a vision in lace, trailing the faint scent of rosewater, lavender, and whatever the apothecary is recommending this month for ladies' nerves. Inside, you're greeted by a chorus of polite greetings. "Good afternoon, Mamma," they chant, in voices that are only marginally sincere. You distribute hugs with careful precision, careful not to disarrange hair ribbons or catch a cold. You compliment a crayon drawing that you hope is meant to be a horse. You inquire after everyone's health, offering vague encouragements like, "Well done," or "How clever," regardless of the answer. The key is enthusiasm without specifics, a delicate art form. The children themselves are as much an accessory as the silver in the dining room, to be displayed, admired, and, when necessary, polished up for guests. Their real lives are run by their nannies, a small army of women trained in everything from piano tuning to accidental bee-sting triage. The eldest child bows, the youngest clings. The middle ones look longingly at the window, possibly plotting their escape. Your job, as you understand it, is to embody the concept of motherhood, not necessarily the daily practice. You listen attentively to a recitation of the day's achievements, a successfully recited poem, a lost tooth, a disagreement over blocks. You smile, nod, and offer the occasional pearl of wisdom. Kindness is its own reward, you murmur, making a mental note to ask the nurse what, exactly, that argument was about. Occasionally a child will attempt to breach the emotional divide, an earnest request for a story perhaps, or a sticky hand reaching for yours. In these moments, you muster genuine affection, hoping it lands somewhere useful. You recall, vaguely, your own mother's advice. Love them fiercely but at a distance, preferably through a closed door. You pat a head, straighten a collar, and try not to weep openly with relief when the nanny signals it's time for hand-washing and supper. The hour draws to a close. A minor skirmish over a doll is quietly quelled by a governess with the reflexes of a seasoned general. The children form a queue, presenting cheeks for a kiss, or in some cases, a formal handshake. You bestow blessings with the air of a monarch visiting a conquered province. Be good. Listen to Nanny. Don't run with scissors or attempt to ride the family dog. As you retreat to the safety of your own quarters, you feel a mixture of accomplishment and exhaustion. You have done your duty, preserved the social order, and survived another day's dose of Edwardian parenthood. The children, left in competent hands, resume their real lives, ones filled with scraped knees, secret societies, and occasional rebellions against the tyranny of boiled cabbage. You meanwhile settle into your chair, handkerchief at the ready, safe in the knowledge that tomorrow's children's hour will be much the same, a gentle ceremonial reminder that love, like chloroform, is best administered in measured doses. Every day you compose letters to distant friends, all describing how peaceful and restful your life is, and none admitting the real reason you haven't left the house since last October. If your handwriting looks a bit wobbly, just blame the postman. Letter writing is the quiet heartbeat of Edwardian existence, a ritual as sacred as tea or the afternoon lie-down. You take your seat at the escritoire, a spot reserved for this daily pageantry, armed with monogram stationery, a fountain pen, and enough restraint to never ever tell the truth. The first step is choosing the right paper, something heavy, scented, thick enough to survive a month's journey by rail, sea, and inevitably being dropped in a puddle by a distracted footman. The act of writing is slow, meditative, and meticulously crafted. You dip the pen in ink, flex your fingers, and ponder the appropriate way to open. Dearest Arabella, I trust this finds you in robust health and good spirits. You smile faintly at the ceiling, as if inspiration might flutter down with the dust motes. The truth is that Arabella's last letter hinted at a breakdown over the colour of her drawing-room drapes, but etiquette requires optimism, never candour. Your own news is carefully curated. You mention the serenity of your mornings, the restorative nature of your daily walks, the delight of watching roses bloom from the window. The fact that you haven't walked past the end of the drive in 6 months is tactfully omitted. The secret stash of chloroform tucked in your writing desk is never discussed, though the splotchy ink and looping script might suggest its influence. If pressed, you will attribute any blots or wobbles to the postman's careless handling, the humidity, or that dreadful business with the dog next door. Between lines of manufactured calm, you weave in questions, never too direct, never too personal. Do tell me, is your neighbour's pianist still so enthusiastic? Has your dear husband recovered from that unfortunate encounter with the cucumber sandwiches? The art is in the asking, not the answering. Letters must be invitations to reply, not confessions to keep. Every letter is an opportunity to rehearse contentment, to polish the image of your life as a tranquil haven of routine and repose. The occasional complaint is allowed, but only if charmingly vague. The weather has been most variable, or my nerves have been rather taxed by all this excitement. Excitement in this context refers to a new delivery of tea, or the minor scandal of seeing the vicar's wife in French gloves. The post itself is an event. Letters arrive in bundles smelling faintly of old lavender and new intrigue. You savour each one, tracing the loops and flourishes of friends who are likewise trapped in their own drawing rooms, all reassuring each other of lives filled with restful pleasures and absolutely no existential dread. Occasionally you wonder if anyone is telling the truth, or if all of you are united in a grand conspiracy of contentment. Sometimes, in an unguarded moment, you allow yourself a burst of honesty. You write a line about the ache for something new, the longing for a change of scene, the hope that someday you'll meet your correspondents anywhere but at the far end of a postage stamp. Then you read it over, sigh, and gently blot it out with sand, returning to the script. After all, candour is for diaries, not for letters that might be intercepted by the maid. The letter, finally sealed with wax and hope, is handed off to the footman, who treats your news as the most important dispatch in England. You watch him go, wondering which friend will next send a missive about her own peaceful, well-ordered life. You know she's just as restless as you. In Edwardian society, longing travels slowly, but at least it's written on beautiful paper, with no shortage of style, and just the tiniest hint of chloroform around the edges. You supervise the cook, tasting nothing, and instead focus on arranging the perfect centerpiece. The real entertainment comes from watching Aunt Mabel nod off into her soup, which is, frankly, the highlight of every meal. Preparing dinner in Edwardian society is a masterclass in priorities. The aim is not nutrition, but impression, not substance, but style. You glide into the kitchen, trailing a cloud of lavender, issuing vague instructions about delicate flavours and a hint of refinement. The cook nods, eyes glazed, knowing that tonight's menu, like every other night, will feature more roots and turnips than actual meat. If a chicken wanders too close to the house, it might be threatened with the stock pot. But true protein is as rare at table as genuine conversation. Your domain, instead, is the dining room. You select candlesticks tall enough to obscure awkward glances, arrange flowers with military precision, and ensure the place cards are positioned for maximum social discomfort. There is an art to placing rivals next to each other, just far enough apart to discourage hair-pulling, but close enough for competitive sighing. You polish the silver until you can see your own worried reflection, just enough to remind you that smiling at supper is an act of bravery. The centerpiece is a towering confection of lilies, roses, and something the gardener insists is seasonal foliage. You suspect it's just creative weeding. It doesn't matter. All eyes will be on the arrangement, not on the tepid soup that begins the meal. As the family assembles, you review the seating chart in your head. Aunt Mabel to your right, always. Her talent for dozing mid-meal is legendary, and if timed correctly can distract from even the most disastrous soufflé. Your spouse is at the far end, ready to deflect talk of politics with his usual wall of agreeable silence. The children, if present, are sandwiched between nannies and stern warnings not to fidget. Dinner service unfolds like a gently unravelling opera. The staff parade in with dishes whose names sound far more interesting than their contents. Potage à la nonchalance, which turns out to be turnip soup. Filet de mystère, which everyone knows is just pike in disguise. No one expects excitement. The goal is edible and faintly impressive. It's less a feast, more a performance in minor inconveniences. You take up your post, eyes scanning for signs of drama. Aunt Mabel, as ever, is the canary in the culinary coal mine. As the main course arrives, her eyelids droop in slow motion, head nodding until, with a soft sigh, she dips gracefully toward her bowl. There's a communal pause, a ripple of amusement, and then the conversation resumes, quiet, relieved, a little envious. For one blissful moment, she is free from the tyranny of boiled mutton and familial expectation. Meanwhile, the real poisons of the evening swirl under the surface. There are the usual doses of digestive cordial for nerves, a spoonful of fortifying tonic for anyone who looks particularly peaked, and the ever-popular sleeping draught slipped into tea for those who prefer to exit dessert discreetly. If you catch the cook eyeing the medicinal brandy, you pretend not to notice. It's best for everyone. You manage to push food around your plate, making the appropriate noises of appreciation. Delightful, you murmur, as you attempt to spear something unidentifiable and beige. Conversation is carefully choreographed. Questions about the garden, praise for the silver, thinly veiled boasts about the number of invitations received this season. By the time pudding appears, a wobbly triumph of eggs, cream, and hope, you're ready for the meal to end. Aunt Mabel stirs, briefly revived by the arrival of sherry. Plates are cleared, gratitude is offered, and you float from the table with a sense of accomplishment. No one starved, no one fought, and the centerpiece didn't catch fire. As the candles burn low, you reflect on another successful dinner. More poisons, less protein, and enough pageantry to distract from the actual food. It's not about nourishment, it's about survival, and sometimes a good nap right at the table. An eligible bachelor arrives and you instantly feel your pulse quicken. Is it romance? Or just the after effects of your sixth whiff of the day? Either way, A dramatic feint guarantees his attention, or at least a reputation for delicate nerves. In Edwardian society, the arrival of a gentleman caller is treated with the kind of ceremonial gravity normally reserved for royal births and shipwrecks. The household shifts into high alert. Maids bustle about, dusting places no one will ever look. The butler rehearses your name in his head, just in case he forgets it in the flurry of introductions. You're swiftly inspected for stray lint, wayward hairpins, and any signs of a recent nap. Someone surreptitiously checks your pulse, then pretends it was only to adjust your bracelet. You're positioned strategically on the settee, a bouquet of fresh flowers within easy reach, and your most becoming shawl draped artfully over your shoulders. The goal seem alluring, but not desperate, charming, but not so lively that you frighten him away. There is a delicate balance here. Too much enthusiasm and you'll be branded forward. Too little, and you risk being outshined by a particularly well-groomed potted fern. The door opens. In strides the bachelor, looking as if he's just returned from conquering the Crimea, even if he's only managed a brisk stroll around Hyde Park. He bows. You stand slowly, elegantly, as though rising from a swoon that you've just barely survived. You greet him with a practiced smile and a nod so slight it could be mistaken for an involuntary twitch. Small talk commences. He comments on the weather, the hydrangeas, or the relative merits of the local cricket club. You respond with the measured interest of someone reading aloud from a train schedule. The conversation is a careful dance, each compliment paid in precise currency. His, a subtle admiration of your taste in lilies. Yours, an almost believable interest in steam engines or parliamentary reform. You laugh at his jokes, which are rarely funny, but it's the laughter that matters. With every flutter of the eyelashes, every slightly prolonged silence, the tension builds. You feel a gentle swoon rising, the way some people feel a sneeze. This is your moment. The timing must be perfect. Not so soon that he suspects you're avoiding his anecdote about fly fishing, not so late that your mother barges in to ask about his income. You place a hand delicately to your forehead, murmur something about the excitement of company, and let gravity do the rest. Your descent is expertly managed. A soft sigh, a slow collapse, a landing that lands you squarely among the floral arrangements. The effect is immediate. The room gasps, the bachelor leaps to your side, tripping slightly on the edge of the rug which you'll remember forever, and the housemaid appears with the smelling salts as if summoned by magic. As you recover, you're treated like the heroine of a minor novel. He presses your hand, mumbles about the fragility of angels, and presents you with a single rose, which you promptly add to your collection of tokens from men who once admired you, at least for a half hour. There are risks to this method, of course. Swoon too dramatically and you may be carried upstairs by mistake. Swoon too often and you'll become an object lesson for the younger cousins. That's why we don't let Gertrude near the azaleas. But for today, you've accomplished your mission. Attention secured, delicate reputation reinforced, and all without the risk of actual conversation. As the bachelor takes his leave, you recline among the flowers, half dreaming, half giddy. Is it romance? Is it nerves? Or just an expertly timed cloud of chloroform? In Edwardian society, who can say? All that matters is that your legend grows, one feint at a time. Society events demand stamina. You last exactly 2 arias before needing fresh air, also known as a private sniff behind the velvet curtains. If anyone asks, you're simply overcome by the music, or the fumes from the gentleman's hair pomade. Getting ready for the opera is a spectacle in itself. There are gloves to be selected, elbow length of course, fans to be coordinated, and jewellery to be carefully weighed to ensure it won't tip you sideways during the national anthem. Your hair is pinned into submission, your corset laced to a level somewhere between swan-like and strangulated, and your face powdered until you rival the marble statues you'll be staring at during the overture. A final check in the mirror reveals a look that's half goddess, half person, in urgent need of horizontal time. The carriage ride is its own odyssey. You and your companions are arranged like rare vases, afraid to move lest a hat feather detach and skewer a friend. The coachman avoids bumps, but every jolt sends a shudder through the assembled ladies. Was that the anticipation of culture, or merely another rib coming loose? Conversation is nervy, peppered with jokes about fainting in the Queen's box and speculation about which society matron will outdo herself by arriving draped in enough diamonds to bankrupt a minor principality. Inside the opera house, everything is designed for drama. The foyer glitters, the stairs sweep, and the seats are upholstered with enough plush velvet to muffle any unseemly swoon. You're ushered to your box, perfectly positioned for viewing both the stage and your social rivals. There are glances, whispers, the subtle rustle of programmes, and the ongoing battle to ensure one's perfume is not upstaged by someone else's more modern eau de cologne. The opera itself is a marathon, not a sprint. The first act is manageable. The soprano hits impossible notes. You smile and nod as if music appreciation is second nature rather than something you learned through sheer exposure and societal threats. By the second aria, your mind has started to wander. How long until intermission? How many people have noticed you're breathing only from the upper third of your lungs? Was the lead baritone always this sweaty? And then, like clockwork, the symptoms strike. Your vision blurs, your ears buzz, and the seats seem to tilt ever so slightly. The heat of the room, the perfume, the pomade, it's all too much. You whisper to your companion that you require a little air, clutching your handkerchief and your reputation. A maid appears, leading you behind the curtains, where the cool air mingles with the unmistakable scent of chloroform. One quick restorative whiff, and you're prepared to face the rest of Don Giovanni, or at least survive long enough to applaud the second act. You return just in time for a scene change, your complexion paler but your spirits lifted. If anyone inquires, you credit your sensitive nature and the emotional intensity of Italian composers. No one questions you. If anything, you're admired for your artistic susceptibility. The only greater proof of culture is bursting into tears during the tragic finale, which, depending on the strength of your anesthetic, is entirely possible. Throughout the night you play your part, clapping at the right moments, exchanging glances with other guests, and fanning yourself whenever your pulse threatens to become noticeable. The opera ends to thunderous applause, much of it from patrons eager for fresh air, supper, and a return to the less perilous world of velvet-free drawing rooms. On the ride home, you recline, quietly triumphant. You've survived another evening at the opera, consciousness mostly intact, dignity preserved, and with just enough composure left to recount your ordeal as a charming anecdote tomorrow at tea. In Edwardian society, sometimes staying awake is the greatest performance of all. Late at night, you gather with your closest friends to share secrets, dreams, and remedies for nerves. The conversation is intimate. The lighting is low and the air is thick with the scent of chloroform and mutual denial. There is a magic to these midnight gatherings, a sense that the constraints of daylight, manners, and the omnipresent watchful eyes of staff have finally loosened their grip. You slip into your most comfortable wrapper, let your hair down with a scandalous disregard for pins, and pad softly through the candlelit corridors to the drawing room, where the best chairs and the softest cushions await. Your companions arrive one by one, faces glowing in the golden light, cheeks flushed from the rare pleasure of being unobserved. Someone brings a tray of petit fours, someone else brings a bottle of medicinal sherry, but the real currency is conversation. The things you cannot say at tea, at luncheon, or while being revived from a faint in front of guests. Here, under the spell of late hour and friendly shadows, honesty almost feels possible. You arrange yourselves in a loose circle, feet tucked beneath blankets, arms draped over the arms of chairs, ready to begin the true business of the night. The talk starts tentatively. Complaints about the weather, jokes about Mrs. Bentley's new hat, the usual gripes about corsets and the impossible art of the perfect swoon. But as the minutes tick by and the sherry loosens tongues, the confessions grow bolder. Someone admits to hiding letters from her mother-in-law in the bottom of the sewing basket. Someone else confesses she's developed an inexplicable crush on the footman, mainly because he reminds her of a tragic hero from a serialized romance. Laughter bubbles up, honest and unguarded, mingling with the sighs of shared relief. In the soft glow, you all seem younger, lighter, more real. Of course, the night would not be complete without a discussion of remedies. Each friend has her favourite. One swears by a particular blend of lavender and laudanum. Another prefers the French stuff that comes in a blue glass bottle and smells faintly of licorice and rebellion. You, as always, reach for your trusty vial of chloroform, dabbing it onto your handkerchief as the conversation dips into tales of heartbreak, homesickness, and the existential horror of wearing duck-egg blue in November. You pass around recipes for sleep, warm milk with a spoonful of honey, crushed valerian root in tea, a chapter of poetry read aloud in the dark. But the real balm is the company itself, the secrets exchanged, the giggles shared, the knowledge that you're not alone in your restlessness or your resistance to society's endless demands. There is comfort in this collective denial, in the whispered agreement that everything is quite all right, even when you know it isn't. As the night deepens, the conversation slows. Someone yawns, another dozes off mid-anecdote, a third curls up like a child and mumbles a wish to run away to the seaside. The room grows softer, the edges blur. Candles burn low, shadows stretch long and gentle across the rugs. Eventually you gather yourselves to return to your rooms, lighter, a little less lonely, the burdens of the day dissolved in shared laughter and secrets. You take your handkerchief, still faintly fragrant with chemical comfort, and tuck it beneath your pillow, secure in the knowledge that tonight, at least, you have been truly understood. In Edwardian society, midnight confessions are a small rebellion, a necessary sedative for souls who spend their days performing serenity. Sleep comes easily now, carrying with it the promise that, whatever the daylight brings, you have your circle, your secrets, and, if all else fails, a perfectly measured dose of denial. Your family physician arrives, prescribing more rest, less stress, and a generous refill of whatever's in your little brown bottle. You nod sagely and wonder if he actually went to medical school or just owns a really convincing moustache. There's a distinct ritual to an Edwardian doctor's visit. It begins with the distant rumble of carriage wheels, the sharp rap at the front door, and the arrival of a man who smells faintly of camphor, pipe smoke, and unwarranted authority. He's announced by the butler with a gravity usually reserved for archbishops and tax collectors. You're waiting in the drawing room, positioned to look as pale and mysterious as possible, cheekbones emphasized, hair artfully loose, a faint suggestion of an earlier faint still lingering about you. The doctor enters, all brisk confidence and polished shoes, clutching his well-worn medical bag. His moustache is magnificent, the sort of facial hair that commands both respect and a slight suspicion of showmanship. He bows, you incline your head, and the examination begins with a practised air of concern. "How are we feeling today?" he asks, as if the answer could ever be anything but delicate. You describe your symptoms: fatigue, listlessness, a certain ennui that descends each afternoon, and an inability to get through luncheon without contemplating escape by carriage or fainting couch. He nods gravely at each one, occasionally jotting notes in a leather-bound book whose pages, you suspect, are mostly filled with doodles and lists of favourite lunch spots. The actual examination is always more theatre than medicine. He checks your pulse, with icy fingers, peers briefly at your tongue, and asks a series of searching questions about your sleeping habits, diet, and recent disturbances to the nerves. Your answers are met with encouraging hums and a declaration that you're suffering from, yet again, a profound case of overexertion, nervous excitement, or the perennial favourite, female troubles. The prescription is as reliable as the sunrise: rest, relaxation, and a strict avoidance of all forms of stress, excitement, and self-determination. He advises you to avoid any rooms with more than 4 people, all letters containing bad news, and especially, under no circumstances, should you be exposed to political debate, lively music, or relatives who might mention the word suffrage. You nod, the picture of gratitude, as he rummages in his bag for a small brown bottle. With a flourish, he produces the elixir du jour, a miraculous restorative said to calm the nerves, encourage gentle slumber, and restore the spirits. You're fairly certain it's mostly chloroform with a splash of brandy, but etiquette forbids asking for a full ingredient list. He gives further instructions, which all sound suspiciously like suggestions for living the most peaceful, horizontal existence possible. A walk in the garden, but only if the weather is very mild. A cup of broth at supper, but never anything spicy or exciting. At least one lie-down every afternoon, and no embroidery after sunset. You promise to follow his advice, comforted by the knowledge that nobody actually checks. Before leaving, he offers a few final pearls of wisdom. Do try to worry less, and have you considered taking up watercolour painting, and assures you that, with patience and plenty of whatever is in your little brown bottle, you'll be feeling like your old self in no time. As he bows out, he pockets his fee, leaving behind a gentle cloud of lineament and ambiguous science. You recline, newly prescribed, newly reassured, and grateful that in Edwardian England recovery is less about getting better and more about perfecting the art of languor. As you take your medicine, you raise an invisible toast to your doctor. May his moustache always be so convincing, and his diagnoses forever vague. In this world, a well-timed prescription is the best excuse for doing nothing at all. And in Edwardian society, that's the healthiest option of all. Every street has its local celebrity faints. The social ladder is climbed by those who can collapse with the most style and fewest injuries. The true masters can orchestrate a swoon that takes down an entire card table. In Edwardian society, the art of fainting is not simply a response to tight corsets or existential dread. It's an arena of athletic competition. The drawing room is your stadium, the chaise your finish line, and your greatest rivals are the women 2 houses down who once managed to swoon into the arms of a viscount and onto the society pages in the same afternoon. It begins with the warm-up. You practice the gentle sway, the artful eye flutter, the perfectly timed gasp. Each move is a blend of ballet and poker, give nothing away, yet leave just enough to suggest that you're always one scandalous remark from total collapse. Your mother coaches you in the classics. Lead with the knees, dear, and never forget to clutch your pearls. Your sister, meanwhile, warns you about overcommitting. Remember Lady Hortense? She fainted so hard at the garden party, she knocked over the rector and ruined the blancmange. Legendary, but she spent the next month in social recovery. There is a delicate hierarchy in this sport. At the bottom are the beginners, whose fainting spells are sudden, graceless, and often result in bruises or worse, spilled tea. They're pitied, but not respected. Next come the steady performers, able to swoon on command, drawing admiration for the subtlety of their collapses and the speed with which their maids revive them. But at the very top are the virtuosos, women who can bring down a room with a single fluttering sigh, whose fainting fits are whispered about for months, whose dramatic timing is so impeccable they manage to collapse just as the conversation turns to politics, poetry readings, or, heaven forbid, accounts. The annual highlight is the fainting season, coinciding with the height of social visits and garden parties. It's understood that the most prestigious dresses will host at least one memorable episode. Mrs. Lacey from number 7 is renowned for her spiral swoon, a manoeuvre so graceful that it once caused 3 men to leap to her aid and 1 to propose marriage on the spot. Not to be outdone, her rival, Miss Hargreaves, staged a double swoon at last year's whist party, strategically fainting into the dessert trolley and ensuring everyone went home sticky and awestruck. Tactics evolve. Some favour the surprise swoon, collapsing during the punchline of a joke. Others go for the silent fall, crumpling so quietly that the only warning is a gentle thud and a single artfully dropped glove. There are risks, of course, too showy, and you'll be accused of seeking attention, too subtle, and your efforts may go unnoticed. The secret is to keep everyone guessing. Was it the excitement, the heat, or merely the triumph of style over stamina? In this high-stakes world, fainting is not just a sign of weakness, but of cunning and social ambition. Every successful swoon comes with a rush of whispered admiration, a flutter of fans, and at least one rival re-evaluating her own technique. The truly gifted manage to faint only when it counts, never during meals, unless the food is especially dire. Always at the climax of gossip, and preferably in a way that leaves the upholstery unscathed. As the sun sets on another day of gentle rivalry and not so gentle collapses, you recline on your chaise, replaying your own performance. Was your landing sufficiently soft? Did your rival look impressed or merely jealous? It hardly matters, for tonight you hold the title. Tomorrow the competition resumes. In Edwardian society, the only thing better than being talked about is being talked about while lying perfectly still, preferably with someone else's card table in tow. As you prepare for bed, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror, pale, poised, and ever so slightly anesthetized. You ponder whether you're actually unwell, or just really committed to the aesthetic. The Edwardian bedtime ritual is a quiet performance played to an audience of 1. The hour is late. The house is finally stilled, save for the muffled footsteps of maids tidying the last traces of the day's drama. In the hush of your dressing room, under the dim glow of a lamp, you find yourself face to face with your own legend. Removing your jewellery is a slow, deliberate act. Pearls are unstrung, brooches are unpinned, each one placed carefully in its velvet box. Your hair, unpinned at last, tumbles down in a heavy wave, freedom for your scalp if nothing else. There is a certain vulnerability in seeing yourself without the armour of society, the hat, the veil, the careful shell of powder and constraint. You wipe away the day's makeup, layer by layer, until only the faintest blush remains. It's oddly unsettling. Your face, in its natural state, looks younger and more tired all at once. You're pale not just by fashion, but by a lifestyle spent indoors, cosseted and confined. The ring of powder left on your collar is a quiet testament to your daily performance. You study your reflection, searching for signs of change, evidence that your routine of rest and retreat has worked some small miracle. Are your cheeks a bit more hollow? Is that a new line, or just a shadow? For a moment you wonder if anyone in the house has ever truly seen you, unadorned, unguarded, undistracted by fainting spells and endless talk of nerves. The ritual of rest has its price. You run a mental tally, hours spent reclining, afternoons blurred by remedies, evenings lost to gentle oblivion. The world outside continues, brighter, louder, more insistent. But here you've cultivated an existence of soft focus, always one sigh away from slumber. You wonder if you have gained tranquility or merely traded vitality for the illusion of serenity. Still, there is comfort in the routine. The slow brushing of hair, the dabbing of lavender water on wrists, the careful folding of your dressing gown. You light a small candle, watching the flame flicker, and think of all the women before you, mothers, grandmothers, great aunts, who perfected the art of looking tired yet interesting, whose reflections are layered with the same gentle mystery. You consider the high cost of being at rest. Friendships, once vibrant, now sustained through letters filled with gentle lies. Ambitions quietly boxed away with summer gloves. Even conversation is rationed, meted out in small, delicate exchanges. You wonder if there might be another way, one that doesn't involve being so exquisitely, perpetually horizontal. But then, the mirror reveals something else. Beneath the pallor and the powder is a strength honed by ritual. You have survived every expectation, every diagnosis, every gentle suggestion to lie down, dear. The reflection staring back at you is not just the product of chloroform and society's whims, but a testament to quiet resilience. You sigh, smoothing your hair one last time, and extinguish the lamp. The room plunges into the softest kind of darkness. Your bed awaits, crisp linen, fluffed pillows, a final faint promise of oblivion. You slip beneath the covers, comforted by the familiar weight of your handkerchief and the knowledge that tomorrow the performance begins again. Rest comes at a price, but for now, in the silent company of your own reflection, you are content to pay it, one peaceful, anesthetized breath at a time. The day ends as it began, with a soothing sniff and a sigh. You sink into a sea of silk sheets and pleasant hallucinations, grateful that tomorrow offers another opportunity to do absolutely nothing in the most extravagant way possible. Night in the Edwardian household is an affair of hushed opulence. The corridors darken, the lamps are turned low, and the bustle of servants fades into the distance. In your bedroom, a palace in miniature, you're enveloped by comfort so excessive it borders on the ridiculous. There are cushions for every conceivable joint, blankets of every conceivable thickness, and a warming pan tucked into the bed like a secret endorsement from the Queen herself. Your nightcap is not just a beverage, but a ritual. The glass on your bedside table contains a suspiciously sweet cordial for restful sleep, as prescribed by Dr. Magnificent Moustache. The recipe is a closely guarded secret, but is rumoured to involve a blend of brandy, laudanum, and something that smells faintly of vanilla and recklessness. You sip delicately, feeling your edges blur, while the familiar tingle of anticipation sets in. You know that before long you will slide out of the real world and into the gentle narcotic mist of dreamland. The preparations are almost sacred. You slip out of your dressing gown and into a nightdress so elaborately ruffled that simply lying down feels like a minor victory over Victorian engineering. You check your pillow, freshly fluffed, encased in crisp linen, cool against your cheek. There is a brief moment of gratitude for the silent work of the night staff, who smooth the sheets and leave a posy of lavender near your lamp. If insomnia ever threatens, it is quietly smothered beneath a pile of eiderdown. You perform your last-minute ablutions in semi-darkness, the cool water splashed over your face to banish any lingering worries. You dab at your temples with lavender oil, tuck a handkerchief beneath your pillow, just in case the night demands a gentle feint, and make sure your brown bottle is within easy reach. There is comfort in preparedness. In this era, the line between medical necessity and lifestyle choice is blurry, and no one is interested in making it sharper. Lulled by the muted ticking of the mantel clock, you review your day's triumphs. Surviving in-laws, out-fainting the neighbours, maintaining the delicate balance between visible fragility and underlying steel. Your mind drifts, as soft as the candlelight. Even your anxieties seem content to take the night off, as if they too are entitled to Edwardian luxury. As your eyes begin to close, reality bends. The boundary between waking and dreaming is thinner here. perhaps a side effect of the cordial, perhaps just the accumulated exhaustion of a day spent reclining. Pleasant hallucinations drift in. A garden where the flowers never wilt, a ballroom where your feet never ache, a conversation where everyone agrees you're the most fascinating woman in the room. In this world you're always admired, never challenged, and certainly never asked to fetch your own hot water bottle. The sheets cocoon you, cool and heavy, and your last conscious thought is one of pure decadent relief. For all its rules and rituals, Edwardian life knows how to honour the end of the day. There is no shame in seeking numbness, no guilt in embracing comfort. In fact, it is the highest aspiration, to be cosseted, sedated and perfectly at peace, if only until breakfast. Soon your breathing deepens, and the worries of lineage, luncheon and lace drift far, far away. You surrender to sleep, to silence, to the blessed oblivion of a night uninterrupted by anything more demanding than the distant call of a nightingale. Tomorrow will come, but tonight you float in a sea of silk and sweetness, carried gently on the waves of Edwardian excess. In this house and in this life, you have perfected the art of doing nothing at all, and never has nothing felt so exquisitely grand. Your housemaid has seen things, mostly you, gently sliding to the carpet every other afternoon. She's perfected the art of catching you before you knock over the tea cart. Behind every graceful swoon is a staff member quietly calculating how much more laundry or vapours will create this week. For the Edwardian housemaid, your dramatic routine is both a spectacle and a logistical hazard. While you recline and recuperate, the real performance happens at floor level. She lurks like a guardian angel in sturdy shoes, always one step behind, eyes peeled for the warning signs. A fluttering hand, a glazed look, a sudden silence as conversation turns to corsets or politics. Some days, she wonders if it wouldn't be simpler to replace every piece of furniture with fainting couches and install a discreet trampoline under the Aubusson. There's an entire choreography to managing a lady in distress. When you begin your descent, she moves with the speed and subtlety of a cat burglar. If the tea cart is in the line of fire, she'll slide it aside with a foot, catching your teacup before it upends itself onto your best Persian rug. She'll cushion your landing with a spare cushion, always tucked nearby just in case, and in a move perfected through practice, artfully position your skirt so that decorum is preserved even in the throes of a chemical swoon. Of course, swooning isn't the tidy romantic affair that society novels would have you believe. The aftermath involves a flurry of practicalities, smoothing your hair, loosening a corset that's constricted not just your breathing but also the entire afternoon schedule, and finding the bottle of smelling salts, never where it was left last. If you come to with a mysterious new powdery smudge or a rearranged updo, it's thanks to her quick work and quicker thinking. Laundry, meanwhile, becomes an occupational hazard. For every delicate handkerchief you use, and sometimes lose mid-faint, she has a corresponding pile of linens to scrub, starch and iron. The lace especially is an enemy unto itself, snagged on chair legs, trailed through gardens, forever holding on to the faintest scent of chloroform, lavender, or a very faint panic. Some housemaids swear they can recognise the stages of a swoon by the pattern of stains left behind. The housemaid is also chief revivalist and quiet witness to all household crises. She's heard you mutter secrets while unconscious, seen you peek through your lashes to check for a suitably sympathetic audience, and stood sentinel during your more theatrical collapses. She's caught family gossip, intercepted scurrying cousins, and even shooed the dog away from your shoes as you lay prostrate on the hearthrug. Occasionally your gratitude comes in the form of a few kind words or a slightly larger tip at Christmas, but mostly it's unspoken, a shared understanding, a brief look of mutual exhaustion as you're propped upright for the next guest's arrival. She'll straighten your skirts, pass you a fresh handkerchief, and vanish as silently as she arrived, ready for the next emergency. What you see as a moment of feminine delicacy, she sees as a minor logistical crisis, another item on a list that runs from dawn until the last candle is snuffed. She knows you're not as fragile as you appear. She also knows that in this house, appearances are everything, and managing them is as much her job as emptying chamber pots or polishing silver. So the next time you feel the vapours coming on, remember the unseen ballet unfolding in your wake. For every graceful swoon, there's a housemaid on the clock, racing against gravity and social catastrophe. And behind every perfectly managed collapse is the real hero of Edwardian domestic tranquility, the one holding the cushion, the smelling salts, and, if necessary, your dignity. You crack open a freshly printed romantic novel, but after 3 pages the heroine's heartbreak feels a little too real. Time for a restorative. A light dab of chloroform on your bookmark helps the plot go down easier, even if you forget the ending before supper. Edwardian afternoons are made for reading, the kind of reading that is as much performance as pleasure, as much distraction as it is education. You settle yourself in a sun-dappled corner of the drawing room, the best chair claimed hours ago with a strategic placement of a handkerchief, your novel of choice, something newly fashionable, its pages crisp, the cover promising both forbidden passion and the reassurance that everything will work out splendidly for the heroine, so long as she faints at the right moments. You try to lose yourself in the words, but it's difficult when your nerves are already taut from a day of corsets, callers, and cryptic correspondence. The heroine's struggles on the page feel a little too familiar. Swooning in moonlit gardens, suffering in silence, and surviving on little more than longing and lemon water. You begin to suspect the author may be reading your diary. By the 3rd heartbreak, your heart is fluttering dangerously near your own dramatic threshold. You pause for a restorative. The vial is discreet, the ritual automatic. A touch of chloroform on your bookmark, a slow inhale as you turn the page. The plot softens around the edges, the prose blurring just enough to make every misunderstanding seem mildly hilarious. The heroine's setbacks now seem less like tragedies, and more like an amusing game of emotional musical chairs. Your mind drifts between chapters, caught somewhere between the fictional woes of the protagonist and the real ones outside your window. You glance up occasionally to observe the household in motion, the maid dusting the mantelpiece with practised indifference, the butler passing by on some mission of silent importance, the faint sound of the cook issuing orders in the distant kitchen. The world is moving, but you are deliciously still. A friend once told you that novels are the safest way to travel. This afternoon, you journey through storm-tossed seas, moonlit gardens and haunted manors, all without leaving your overstuffed armchair. Each chapter is another step away from the pressing realities of Edwardian existence. The expectations, the suppressed ambitions, the omnipresent need to appear both perfectly fragile and infinitely resilient. The best novels are equal parts escape and mirror. You find yourself rooting for the heroine, cursing her enemies, and occasionally wishing you could trade places, just for the novelty of having a clear purpose besides being charming at dinner. But, inevitably, the heroine's triumphs are hard-earned. By page 100 you find yourself ready for a break, not just from the narrative, but from the exertion of reading itself. You close the book for a moment, letting your eyelids droop, the faint scent of your restorative still lingering. The line between fiction and reality grows blurry. Did you just imagine a marriage proposal, or was that the gardener's hat in the rosebed again? No matter. The important thing is that, for the length of a few chapters, you lived many lives, most of which required less maintenance than your current one. As the afternoon wanes, you mark your page, careful not to smudge the spot with your tincture of choice. You may never remember exactly how the novel ends, most likely with a wedding, a fainting fit, or both. but you know you'll be able to bluff your way through a book club should the need arise. After all, everyone else is doing the same. Reading in Edwardian society is a respectable way to appear busy while doing absolutely nothing. It soothes the nerves, quiets the mind, and provides the perfect excuse for an afternoon spent in soft-focus solitude. And if you wake from your literary haze just in time for supper, no one will question your glassy-eyed look. They'll simply assume the heroine died tragically, and in a way she did. Right between page 40 and your third dose of restorative. There's a crisis in the dressing room, a torn hem, a missing glove, or, worst of all, someone else wearing the same hat. You do what any reasonable woman would. Collapse stylishly onto a divan, fanning yourself with a handkerchief that smells suspiciously chemical. The Edwardian dressing room is a theatre of dreams and nightmares, with you as both star and audience. It's early evening, and you're midway through the transformation from day-weary to dazzling. The air is thick with starch, lavender, and a tension that could snap a corset in half. Your maid flutters about like a nervous sparrow, arms full of petticoats, as you supervise from your pedestal, holding court in nothing but a slip and rising anxiety. It always begins innocently enough. You select a gown, silk, pale blue, faintly shimmering in the light, when disaster strikes. A hem, meticulously stitched only yesterday, has decided to part ways with the bodice. It's an act of treason. Your maid gasps, you gasp. The world briefly tilts on its axis. You clutch your handkerchief to your face, the familiar tingle of chloroform working its magic. Fetch the sewing basket, you command weakly, though everyone knows what you really need is a fainting couch and plausible deniability. Disaster rarely travels alone. Next comes the missing glove, always the left, always the one with the pearl buttons. You rifle through drawers and hat boxes, overturning memories of happier times when all accessories existed in pairs. Each moment increases the tension. You imagine the judgmental stares of aunts and rivals, the muttered comments about poor attention to detail. In Edwardian society, an incomplete outfit is a social misdemeanor, second only to having opinions about politics. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to the horror of discovering a duplicate hat. Word arrives from the hallway. Lady Cressida has arrived in the very same confection of ribbons and ostrich feathers you have planned for the night. Your pulse quickens. Your maid covers her mouth in shock. You contemplate sending a servant with a strategic distraction, perhaps a sudden fire in the drawing room, or a fainting goat in the garden. Instead, you do the only thing an Edwardian woman of sense can do. Collapse onto the nearest divan, head thrown back, handkerchief pressed to your nose, the scent of chemical comfort your only solace. While you drift somewhere between consciousness and couture-induced despair, your maid works miracles. Hem is stitched, a glove, perhaps not the right one but a passable stand-in, is located, and the offending hat is swapped out for another, less controversial, but still sufficiently dramatic. The whole ordeal is conducted in whispers, stitches, and an occasional clandestine sip of restorative from your emergency bottle. Recovering, you rise slowly, your composure restored, if not your faith in haberdashery. You are addressed, re-accessorized, and thoroughly inspected. You peer into the mirror, searching for signs of fatigue, heartbreak, or rebellion. With a quick pinch to your cheeks and an extra dab of perfume, you emerge as the very picture of effortless glamour, a walking, swooning miracle. As you float toward the door, you rehearse your cover story. Should anyone ask about your slightly mismatched gloves or the last-minute switch in headwear, you'll feign confusion, blame the lighting, or attribute your choices to a continental flair. The key is confidence, the silent pact among women everywhere that no wardrobe malfunction must ever be allowed to threaten one's status. Later, At supper or the soiree, no one will be any the wiser. Compliments will be paid, hats admired, and you'll exchange the briefest of glances with Lady Cressida, both acknowledging the near miss in the silent language of survivors. No one will know how close you came to social annihilation, or how many dabs from your brown bottle it took to pull yourself together. In the world of Edwardian fashion, disasters are inevitable, but true elegance lies in recovery. Collapse, revive, and stride forth. The show must always go on. Nothing tests the Edwardian spirit like an interminable charity auction. As the speeches drag on, and the bidding stalls at half a guinea for a signed umbrella, you rely on your trusty vial to maintain that serene, slightly glazed expression expected of high society. Charity events are the great equalizer of Edwardian life. Whether you're a duchess or merely adjacent to one, attendance is not optional. The afternoon begins with a flurry of activity. Gloves are smoothed, hats anchored with pins, and calling cards pressed into reticules like miniature invitations to penance. You arrive with a carefully cultivated look of enthusiasm, lips upturned, eyebrows gently arched. But beneath the surface, your heart beats in anxious anticipation of boredom. The venue is grand, the chairs are hard, and the programme is printed in a typeface best described as illegibly ornate. You're ushered to your seat among an audience of similarly resigned women, all arranging their skirts with a collective sigh. A glance around the room confirms your suspicions. No one is here for fun, and at least 3 people are calculating how soon they can fake an urgent family emergency. The opening speech is always given by someone with an unshakable belief in the transformative power of bread pudding sales. You clap dutifully, aware that your applause signals not support, but the hope that things will move along. The list of auction items is read aloud, each one greeted with progressively less enthusiasm. A monogrammed footstool, a commemorative teacup, a painting of an indeterminate animal. By the time the signed umbrella makes its appearance, you sense the collective will to live draining from the front row. This is where the true art of feigning interest comes into play. You master the vacant yet polite stare, a gaze that suggests both deep empathy and a mild concussion. Your hand hovers above your lap, fingers idly twisting a handkerchief dabbed with chloroform, the Edwardian equivalent of noise-cancelling headphones. A discreet inhale, and the speeches fade to a pleasant buzz, the sort of background noise you imagine angels must endure at heavenly town meetings. Occasionally, a bidding war breaks out, usually over something astonishingly useless. A crocheted cosy for the punch bowl or an inkstand shaped like Lord Nelson. You raise your paddle with the vague hope of impressing the committee, only to panic when you accidentally win a commemorative plate featuring a view of Bognor Regis. No matter. It will join the others in your ever-growing cupboard of regrets. Between lots, you make small talk with your neighbours, polite inquiries about the health of relatives, the success of this year's dahlias, and the whereabouts of Lady Mudge's elusive poodle. Conversation is punctuated by yawns artfully concealed behind lace fans. If you're especially fortunate, someone faints. This brief burst of drama is a welcome interlude, drawing the attention of the room and briefly shifting focus from the speaker's ongoing treatise on the importance of soup kitchens. Refreshments offer a temporary escape. Tepid tea, slightly stale sponge cake, and the blessed relief of standing up. You circulate, bestowing compliments with practiced ease. What an inspiring speech. How clever of you to organise the umbrella display. All the while plotting your route to the nearest exit. Your contribution to the raffle, an ornate pincushion you've never used, earns a nod of approval from the organising committee. At last, the auction winds down, and guests are released with a final round of applause. You retrieve your coat, your charity plate, and your dignity, and make for home, where you'll regale your family with tales of heroic endurance and perhaps an exaggerated bidding war for comic effect. In the end, you have raised funds, maintained decorum, and survived yet another ordeal. In Edwardian society, charity may begin at home, but the true miracle is staying awake until the closing speech. It's fashionable to hold séances, searching for messages from the afterlife, though half the table is actually communing with their inner pharmacist. The candles flicker, a table levitates, and you're never sure if it's spirits from beyond or just the effects of this morning's tonic. The Edwardian fascination with spiritualism is less about genuine belief and more about a craving for novelty and entertainment. After all, when you've mastered every other parlour trick, fainting, gossip, and balancing a teacup on a trembling wrist, the next logical step is to invite the dead to join your social calendar. Invitations go out on heavy embossed cards. You are cordially invited to an evening of supernatural inquiry. Refreshments will be served. RSVP by telegraph or Ouija board. The drawing room is transformed into a shadowy sanctuary. Curtains are drawn, gas lamps are dimmed, and someone produces a dramatic quantity of candles, their flames shivering in the nervous air. Guests arrive dressed in a spectrum of sombre hues, half in mourning, half in anticipation of seeing someone else make a fool of themselves. Your host, flushed with excitement, and possibly sherry, presides at the head of the table, a self-declared medium with a dramatic cough and a flair for the theatrical. You take your seat, careful to choose a sturdy chair and a neighbour with a calming disposition. The centrepiece is a collection of objects meant to entice the departed. A lock of hair, a faded photograph, a biscuit tin for any spirits with a sweet tooth. It's unclear whether the table will be channeling loved ones or simply collapsing under the combined weight of anticipation and candle wax. As hands are joined, a hush falls. The opening invocation is muttered, half remembered from a book, half invented on the spot. O spirits, we beseech thee, give us a sign. The circle tightens, pulses quicken, and you become acutely aware of how many of your companions have sampled a nerve tonic, a calming drop, or, in Lady Forsyth's case, 3 full glasses of her favourite laudanum cordial. Soon, the entertainment begins. The medium's eyes roll, the table creaks ominously, and a draught from the window rattles the teacups. Someone gasps, convinced they've felt a spectral hand. Someone else stifles a giggle, convinced they've felt nothing more than Lady Gwendolyn's cold feet. The table lifts, just a fraction, just enough for everyone to pretend they believe, while the candles gutter and cast enormous shadows that flicker like memories. Messages are spelled out. Beware the gardener. Do not trust the fishmonger. Remember to feed the parrot. The afterlife, it seems, is surprisingly invested in household affairs. Your mind, pleasantly softened by your own tonic, floats somewhere between amusement and awe. Is that a spirit's whisper, or just Mrs. Lacey, ventriloquizing through a mouthful of Madeira cake? It hardly matters. The mystery is the point. By the time the séance concludes, several guests are in tears, though whether from emotion, boredom, or side effects is anyone's guess. The table has survived, the room is thick with incense and speculation, and the medium looks ready for a good lie-down. You feel content, even uplifted, as if you've brushed up against eternity, or at least escaped an hour of discussing new curtains. As you say your good nights and collect your wrap, you reflect on the strange comfort of it all. The living and the dead side by side, each reassured by the other's continued absence of certainty. The future remains shrouded, but tonight at least, you have had your fill of mystery, laughter, and gentle chemical haze. You drift off to bed, the candlelight still flickering in your mind. Maybe the spirits spoke, maybe they didn't. In Edwardian society, it's the story that matters, and a séance, like a good feint, is all about the performance. Tomorrow, The drawing room will be full of skeptics, but tonight you sleep with the peculiar satisfaction of knowing that, for an hour, the beyond came calling, or at least you all pretended it did, with considerable style. So tonight, as you finally drift out of Edwardian society and back into your own perfectly breathable bed, let's take a moment to appreciate just how much effort it once took to do absolutely nothing. You survived a full day of tight corsets, delicate meals, crushing social expectations, and the ever-present temptation to lie down dramatically and inhale something you definitely shouldn't. You navigated gossip, etiquette, and boredom so intense it required chemical intervention. And somehow, through all the fainting couches and polite nodding, these women endured. They lived in a world where rest was prescribed, emotions were pathologized, and the solution to mild discomfort was unconsciousness. And yet they carried on, one tasteful swoon at a time. It's easy to laugh at the absurdity of it all, the chloroform handkerchiefs, the dramatic collapses, the medical advice that boiled down to try passing out more often. But beneath the lace and lavender was a society placing enormous pressure on women to be perfect, passive, and pleasant at all times. Their exhaustion wasn't imaginary. Their escape just came in a very strange bottle. So as you settle deeper into your mattress, free to stretch, breathe, and exist without a corset tightening your organs into submission, maybe whisper a small thank you. Thank you for modern medicine that doesn't involve fainting. Thank you for rest that doesn't require an audience. Thank you for discomfort that can be solved with a glass of water instead of a Victorian anaesthetic. Because history may be absurd, uncomfortable, and occasionally chloroform-scented, but it's also proof that people adapt, endure, and find strange little comforts even in the most restrictive worlds. Now let your breathing slow, let your shoulders drop, no expectations, no etiquette, no dramatic collapse required, just sleep.